What was once a fiercely guarded secret evolved into a time-honored tradition of professional wrestling. But is it completely dead now? We're pulling on that thread next on Till We Make It. I'm Mike Quackenbush, and this is Till We Make It. If you are passionate about the craft of professional wrestling and you're never done learning all about it, then you've landed in the exact right place, my friend. What are you waiting for? Go ahead, join the Till We Make It tribe. Subscribe down below. Today's video was inspired by one of my loyal patrons, Boone. So I just want to take a moment at the very top of this to extend my thanks to Boone for the idea, and to extend my thanks to my newest patron, Jack, for the support. If you'd like to join this awesome roll call of people, the fine folks who help keep this channel alive, then follow the link down below in the descriptus and become part of our community over on Patreon. To start today's topic, we have to begin with a little time travel. For over 100 years, pro wrestling has had its own secret handshake. But to understand its origin, we have to go all the way back to the first of the four eras of pro wrestling, the carnival era. Back then, this secret handshake, which looked firm, but in reality had no intensity, no pressure, no squeeze to it whatsoever. This was a method of workers indicating to each other who's on the inside and who is on the outside. And back in that era, when money was frequently bet on the outcome of matches at pro wrestling shows held in a carnival context, it was extremely risky business to openly discuss things like which money is going to be bet on who and what the predetermined finishes might be. It was a method of protecting the secrets of professional wrestling. The secret handshake said, I know what's up. I know it's a work. I know the finishes are predetermined. And conversely, if someone just came up and shook hands like a regular Joe, that might be a signal that we're all going to be very careful about what we disclose while we are in their presence. The secret handshake back then was sort of the key to going behind the kayfabe curtain, so to speak. Before I go any further, if you're learning something from today's video, please leave me a like-a-palooza down below. It helps the channel to grow. Now, let's fast forward a few decades into the second era of pro wrestling, the territory era. And here, the secret handshake carries forward all of its carny connotations while growing to take on a new meaning as well. This one, a light as a feather handshake, tells a fellow professional what they can expect from you later on that night in the ring. It says, I'm not stiffing you here on our first meeting, nor am I going to stiff you later on when we meet in the ring. I'm light. I'm not some bag of bricks. It's an indicator of what the work is going to be like later on in the night. And it's a symbol of trust. It's a silent contract between two working pros that is sealed with a barely there handshake. Even in the territory era, there are some pockets of working pros who begin to discard the tradition of the secret handshake because they feel as if it's a relic from a bygone era. While at the very same time, there are countless regional variants of the handshake that begin to blossom. I have met some old-timers who only do the shake with the top two fingers on the hand, and I've met others who only do it by applying pressure with their fingertips, never with the meat of their palm. The late great King Kong Bundy had showed me how he likes to cover up his worker handshake by placing his second hand over top in case any outsiders happen to be around observing it. And I know plenty of others who like to mask what they're doing with their secret wrestling handshake by putting it in the middle of a very tight bro hug as they are doing it. And if we fast forward a few more decades, we land in the third era of pro wrestling, the cable TV era. This is the era of wrestling when I broke in. And while the secret handshake still carried all of its previous connotations, it continued to take on new meaning at that time. When I was breaking in, that secret wrestler handshake was a signal which said, I have been properly trained. And someone who walked into a locker room and started squeezing people's hands really hard would often get a roll of the eyes from a seasoned veteran. In fact, that's the first context in which I ever heard the phrase, a victim of poor training. A dude that squeezed people's hands hard in the locker room were often remarked to be victims of poor training because no one bothered to teach them the wrestler handshake. And beyond my own experience, I've heard of other meanings that the handshake took on. I recently heard Arn Anderson articulate what it meant to him. He said that a wrestler's handshake was a sign of trust, that I'm not going to hurt you in the ring. We can trust one another while we're out there. And if you have shown up to work today with an injury, I am skillful enough to work around that injury so you are in no worse condition when the night is over. And I happen to think that's kind of awesome. If you've stuck with me this far, you might be wondering to yourself, Mike, what about in Mexico or in Japan? Has this tradition of American carnivals migrated to other key wrestling hotspots? And in my experience, the answer to that is no. Only Mexican or Japanese wrestlers very familiar with American wrestling culture have adopted the secret handshake. And removed from that, remember that American carnival era wrestling had minimal impact on the development of lucha libre in Mexico and virtually no impact on the development of pro res in Japan. Each has its own culture and its own traditions therein. So, we've covered 3 of the 4 eras of pro wrestling. Carnival era, territory era, cable TV era. That leaves just the era we are in right now, at least at the time of recording this video, the social media era. And the reality is, in a post-pandemic world, handshakes in general have fallen out of favor. You are far more likely to see wrestlers greeting each other these days with a Misawa elbow or a fist bump than a handshake. And the secret pro wrestling handshake is a touchstone of Kayfabe 1.0, a method of protecting the secrets of pro wrestling that is by and large irrelevant in modern times. Nevertheless, I do know some people who will still do the secret wrestler handshake. They do it maybe just to crack up the old timers who remember the way things used to be. I know other people who maintain their tradition even though they're well aware the handshake itself has lost all of its meaning in a modern context. And me, I prefer a standard issue firm handshake myself. But what about you? Where do you weigh in on this one? Have you ever heard of this before? What's your experience and what's your preference like? Tell me all the things down below in the comments. If tracing this thread forward through history is right up your alley, then you will love my book. Pro Wrestling History, 6 Threads and 16 Decades, follows the emergence and evolution of 6 key innovations like tag team wrestling and intergender wrestling from its origin point forward to the present day. And you can grab a copy right now over on Amazon. They'll send a digital copy to your device in seconds, or on audible.com where I read you the audiobook myself. Go grab one for yourself today.